Coming up on Man Enough.
You are indoctrinated or inculcated into these cultures, whether it's the football team or the military, where it is violent, it is aggressive. By keeping things compartmentalized, I deal very well with stress, but you become emotionally detached. You might be called cold or distant. You need to be situationally alert. A lot of these professions put you on alert for that it becomes a lifestyle. And when that becomes the way that you live, you've really missed out on the fullness and richness of life.
Being man enough, what does that mean?
It's really manly to mess up, admit you're wrong, and then grow.
I couldn't accept that I was evil, so maybe I'm broken, but those broken things could be corrected.
Intimacy between a father and a son is me just wanting to put my head in your lap.
I love you, son.
You haven't called me benevolent sexist, but my experience is women are better.
Even if it's a positive, it's still not equality.
I don't blame men for that. I just blame the system.
This
Is
Man enough. Hello and welcome back to Man Enough. My name is Liz Plank.
I'm Jamey Heath.
And Justin is not here today.
Why?
Because he's in an undisclosed location relaxing, doing some self-care.
Did we kick
Maybe
him off?
doing some
We kicked him off the
facials.
podcast, didn't we?
We locked the door. And
Sorry, dude, you're done.
No, we miss Justin.
We miss him.
We really do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about who we are. Liz?
Who we are.
What do we do
Who
here?
am I don't know.
What do we do here at Man Enough?
What do we do? Well, we have conversations about gender that are very inclusive, that are inclusive of everybody. Men being very much included and invited and encouraged to be part of this conversation and talk about what masculinity means to them and what friendship means to them, what closeness means to them, what love means to men. And we do that, and we also have fun. We have
fun.
a lot of fun.
We
doing
have
it.
deep conversations. Liz, have, I consider myself a pretty decent guy who's made a lot of mistakes, but one that cares deeply about the transformation of society. But you've never arrived.
No.
So what I love about what we do is we have guests on, we have conversations ourselves, and it gives me opportunity to reflect and continue to refine who I am. And I've learned so much from you. Of course,
so
we've learned so much from Justin and from our guests of how to be a better me, a better man. And to have this conversation, hopefully, help another care about that journey as well.
Yes.
So this is kind of what we do.
It's kind of what we do. It's kind of our thing. Kind of our thing.
What are we doing today?
We have an amazing guest, Major Tom Schueman, who's with us today in studio. I'm really excited.
So excited.
Major Tom Schueman, who served in Afghanistan for 16 months. Tom was awarded a Purple Heart after he and others were ambushed in a field on November 9th in 2010. And he went on to get his master's in English literature at Georgetown University. And he teaches English literature at the U.S. Naval Academy. He gets up at 5 a.m. No, he leaves his house at 5 a.m. And I have many questions about how I can accomplish that one day. He remains in active duty in Annapolis, Maryland, and he just wrote a book together with Zainullah Zaki, who served as an interpreter for the U.S. forces.
Tell everybody what the name of your book is.
Sure, book's Always Faithful.
Let's lift it up for those who watch us.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story of two friends and male friendship. And after over 6 years of battling bureaucracy with Major Tom Schueman and as his advocate, Zach immigrated successfully to America with his family in 2021. So we're really, really thrilled. Welcome, Major Tom Schueman.
Dude, welcome to the Man Enough podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's so sweet to have you here. We're hoping to go deep in, have some fun conversations. Maybe you can share with us some things that we can take away, how to be better. You've experienced a rich life, we know.
Well, let's go deep, okay? This is a podcast about being real and being vulnerable.
Sure.
So when was the last time that you, Major Tom, Mr. Amazing, didn't feel like you were enough?
Sure. I would push back on a lot of that praise, but that's kind of you. I think I just started a new job as the operations officer of an infantry battalion. So there's a little over 1,000 Marines, and I'm responsible for training them and preparing them to deploy to combat. I did not attend an operations officer course. I did not get a certificate that says you are now qualified to to be an operations officer. And so I think stepping into this unit who's kind of halfway through their training cycle and going to deploy to the Pacific in the near future, and the gravity of this profession is it's a life or death, and so it's not like if you have a bad day in the office, you lose some assets or some money. Your stock goes down. No, a bad day will ultimately result in young men and women's life. And so when you are responsible for those young men and women, and you have responsibility to their family, so you want to give them the best training possible to set them up for success. But I think whether it was when I started the graduate program at Georgetown or when I started teaching English at the Naval Academy, I think that's normal, that initial insecurity, and it's healthy to have that humility. So I think, the opposite is to kind of be arrogant or over-assume something, and having there's a small degree of imposter syndrome is probably healthy, normal. And then I think, like anything, you kind of get into your rhythm, you kind of figure things out. With the Marine Corps, what makes the Marine Corps challenging is that it's kind of as soon as you really figure out a job, it's your time to move to your next job, because you change, like, we call them billets, like every 2 to 3 years. And so you kind of really get, but it's also good because it guards against complacency. That little bit of insecurity as you begin something is really, it gives you a healthy respect for whatever you're entering into. You
have an amazing friend that we thought, we would hope to have on the podcast with you, Zach, who you developed a friendship with and a relationship with while you were in Afghanistan, who was a translator, right?
Yes.
And you guys built this friendship. Give us just a little glimpse of that, of what that was and what that meant and why that was so powerful, that you've remained friends and then wrote a book together.
Sure. At the nascent phases of our relationship, it was very transactional. I needed to speak to local people who spoke Pashto. He spoke Pashto and spoke English, and so and he was also good at his job. Many of the interpreters were quitting because of how risky it was in that at that time in Afghanistan, and so he was good at his job, and he showed up and went on patrols. Very quickly, that relationship moved beyond being transactional when he took extreme measures where he exposed himself to risk and dangers that were well outside of his job description. And so through that shared adversity and through that shared danger, he quickly transcended this translator platoon commander, and he really became fellow brother Marine. And when the Taliban was trying to kill him and he was eligible for a specific program, he said, "Can you help?" I owed my life to him, like quite literally. But beyond the fact that he had saved my life at given points, it was just, based on principle, the right thing to do. And so we spent 5 years submitting for this visa application. We could not surmount the bureaucracy. And it came down to a personal friend of mine who was at the airport last summer when everybody's familiar with those images. I had a friend there who, through his own courage and heroism, and his team pulled Zach and his family through the gate and after 2 prior failed attempts that were very harrowing. The bonds that you form under fire are unique, and we can kind of talk about this idea of the role of the leader or the kind of the head man in the platoon is like you can't you can't pass down your worries and your anxieties and your stress to your Marines. Like you have to as a leader, you have to hold those. And Zach was, since he wasn't technically one of my Marines, I could kind of confide in him. And so not only did he probably he definitely, not only did he save my life physically, but, from my own kind of mental, probably saved me from having a mental breakdown as well. And so I think I made him a promise that I would do anything for him and I would help him get to the United States. And through a lot of help of a lot of great people, we were able to maintain that promise.
You're listening to the Man Enough podcast. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, it's Jamey here from the Man Enough podcast. You know, this year I've been focusing on bettering myself, and one of the ways I've been doing that is by increasing my daily exercise. And that's not so easy because with that increase, I need to be sure that I'm staying hydrated, as well as building up my electrolytes, and that's where Element comes in. I'm trying to cut back on my sugar intake, and Element has no sugar. I like things that taste good. Element has rich flavors like chocolate caramel with simple ingredients. Element has a clean, fresh taste. And like I said, Element is simple. No sugar, artificial ingredients, coloring, gluten, or fillers added, and it's suited to anyone following a keto, low-carb, whole foods, or paleo diet. The proof is in the clientele. Element is loved by professional athletes, tech leaders, and exercise enthusiasts alike. So head to drinkelement.com/manenough, and for a limited time, get a free Element sample pack with any purchase. That's drinklmnt.com/manenough. And thank you to Element for supporting our show. All right. Welcome back to the Man Enough podcast. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love hearing
What
that.
did it teach you about male friendship? Like, did you ever have I think on this podcast, we talk a lot about how men have trouble building that kind of intimacy with other men. What did it sort of teach you about that went against what you had learned about how to relate to other men?
Certainly that was just a almost at that point survival necessity that I be vulnerable. Like I was quite literally over capacity, over pressurized, over stressed that I had to have a valve. I had to release some of that. And by talking to somebody, certainly like so much healing can happen through discourse. And so to trust him that he would, not share what I was saying, but so that, like there's some trust there. There's some obviously kind of communication, but it was really out of matter of necessity. But then it kind of grew into friendship, and I think male friendships in particular, like any type of relationship or friendship, they just take communication and consistency. And so we often think we're too busy or we don't make and like no relationship will flourish unless it's watered and fed. And so what's on this phone is not real like relationship. You have to actually speak and see. And so I have 2 or 3 friends that we have a schedule that we will see each other once a month, like no matter what.
Schedule it in.
And that when we're not in the same state, like we will the phone call before either of us go to work. So that means 4 a.m., like very painful for us both. But we've got to make this happen. And so it just like any other kind of relationship or friendship, it really kind of takes communication, commitment, and I think they'll grow.
Be as disciplined in your, friendships with men as you are in any other part of your life.
That's right. Thank you for that. I'd love to know, being that this has been, how long have you been in the military?
I'm going on 15 years.
15. The men and women that are a part of being in the military requires a certain type of confidence. I don't want to say in the line of fire, but to be able to have that capacity requires certain attributes, right?
Sure.
Do you have a perspective on the masculinity that is in the young people? Do you find that there is some things that can be revisited and relooked at, and the culture? And I'm not trying to say anything about military itself, but the culture of people and what that might breed.
It is certainly a generally masculine culture. I'm in the infantry, and I believe in my unit of 1,000 people, there are 2 or 3 women. So just by its very nature, it's masculine.
Yeah.
And so.
And masculine is a good thing. I'm not saying masculinity is a bad thing, but
Sure.
It can be if it's used incorrectly, right? So.
Of course, it absolutely could be. I think, some of them, what I view as some of the positive masculine traits that correlate well with this profession that I think you'll find is really self-composure, equanimity. I think those are masculine characteristics or traits that are vital to the profession. And so your ability to make sound decisions, sound judgments, and think rationally in a chaotic environment. So there's all this entropy moving around you, and you have to be the homeostasis there. And I think that one of the most desirable traits of a man is someone who's self-composed. And so I think that's a trait that is fostered, developed, cultivated, and a job requirement.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I'll put this out there, and it's not necessarily an assumption from anyone here, but when I talk about any of these traits today, I just want to make sure that I'm very clear that I don't view them as binary or mutually exclusive.
Okay, beautiful.
Right? And so if I say self-composure is a necessary masculine attribute, and especially in my line of work, it doesn't. I'm not saying that means that that it's not also feminine, or that women can't do those things. And so that's what I think sometimes when I found that you have a discussion around femininity and masculinity, it often becomes it's got to be this, not even necessarily gender, but as if it can only be men that do this, and it can only and so I just think it's, to me, these traits, these characteristics, or these concepts aren't binary or mutually exclusive in one way or the other. They don't. Because when I talk about my hero, my mother, she ultimately exhibited many of these, what we would categorize as masculine traits, and did it exceedingly well. But so I think I like to just little disclosure.
Perfectly fair. I appreciate that. Would you mind sharing real quickly? Sorry, Liz, I know you have some questions. And thank you so much for sharing some of those positive things that come from it in order to do it. Are there things that you recognize that can be redefined, refined?
Sure. I mean, it's important that we first and foremost, I think you'll find that most people who have been to combat are peace advocates. So you'd be hard pressed to find someone who has been on a battlefield and is warmongering. So first and foremost, I think we become the biggest proponents of peace, especially when you've seen the realities of war. But you have to say, you look at instruments of power. And so the instruments of power that a nation has: diplomacy, information, military, economy. Why do you have a military? You have a military instrument of power to violently persuade or coerce someone about a national interest that you had. That means that you failed to use your words. You couldn't use information. You couldn't economically convince someone. So now you're saying, I'm going to convince you with a bayonet or at the pointy end of a gun, right? And so we just had to talk about why a military, and so that is violent work, is what it comes down to. It is through the threat of violence or the actual execution of violence. And so when preparing young men and women to be violent up to the point of killing people, some aspects of a more sensitive environment certainly are probably not applicable. And the other side of that, I think where we can potentially go wrong, or where I've made some kind of mistakes, is the idea of just push. Whatever you're going through, push. Don't have time. We have a thing called mission has priority. Troop welfare or mission has priority. And sometimes, often the mission has the priority over the well-being of the people. I think you if you had to attack a machine gun on a hill, you couldn't say I'm also interested in your best well-being, because there's no best well-being while attacking a machine gun position. And so what I have a hard time sometimes separating is not everything is a machine gun that needs to be taken right now. And so I kind of default to this kind of aggressive, let's just push, no time to kind of deal with whatever we're dealing with. And that ultimately comes at a cost. And so maybe the two best examples I can give is so compartmentalization is critical to your battlefield success. You're the battlefield conductor, and you're the conductor, and the battlefield is your symphony. And so all these things are happening. You just saw someone that you love lose their leg. You just heard over the radio that your best friend was just killed. You can't take each of these emotions individually and process them in the moment because you have a job to do.
Yeah.
And so I will say, no, I don't have time to feel that. I'm going to just put it in here, put it away. And it allows you to be a very effective commander. I spent almost 3 years in Afghanistan and had many of these moments where I didn't have time to deal with these emotions, and I compartmentalized them, and it made me really good at my job. But when I got back, I never, what we call like unpacking the boxes. I never went and reevaluated any of those experiences. And here's like a part like of the military that, is maybe an issue. Whereas what I would tell myself is like, hey, you don't have time. You've got these Marines that you got to take care of. You don't have you can't focus on this. You've got a job to do, a mission to do. Keep pushing. Those they don't disappear. Those emotions, those feelings, those traumas, they're just going to resurface at some point.
Yeah. If you right.
And so you have this festering wound, and you just kind of keep trying to put a Band-Aid over it rather than heal it. And it manifests in very unhealthy behavior. And so that for me was something that I finally, through my own destructive behavior, because I wasn't dealing with these things, because I was just keeping them compartmentalized, but then they would bubble up of their own fruition. What I recognize is that I was scared. It wasn't that I had to focus on the mission. It wasn't that. It was that I was scared to do the work and what those emotions that I might feel. And so I didn't have the moral courage to interrogate why, thoughts, feelings, and actions. Where are these thoughts coming from? And they're driving these certain actions. To think about where the thought that drove the feeling, that drove the action came from. That's scary stuff. And I think that's one thing that I found that we can probably do better.
You're listening to the Man Enough Podcast. We'll be right back. Hey, everyone. It's Jamey Heath here from the Man Enough Podcast. And I bet you didn't know something, that March is National Nutrition Month. And HelloFresh makes it easy to choose delicious, dietitian-approved meals. Simply look for the dietitian win tag on their menu choices for meals under 700 calories and with 1/3 less sodium. And HelloFresh has 40 weekly recipes to choose from for all meal occasions, lifestyles, and preferences. Take your pick from meals like soy glazed salmon with rice or mushrooms and chive risotto. Now, what's cool about HelloFresh is you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Now, HelloFresh is not a meal kit service. It's an ingredient box and recipe service designed to make cooking hassle-free. And let me tell you how HelloFresh has made my life easier. I don't have to spend a bunch of time at the grocery store anymore. I don't have to look up recipes and hope that I have all the ingredients to even make what I want to make, which means I'm not frustrated in the kitchen anymore. And my kids even get to help me cook because it's all laid out for us with the right amount of portions of everything. I'm not playing around with you. This has made mealtime a whole lot easier. So go to HelloFresh.com/manenough60 and use code manenough60 for 60% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/manenough60 and use code manenough60 for 60% off plus free shipping. All right. Welcome back to the Man Enough Podcast.
Yeah, but and you talk about not having the moral courage to do that, but it's not your fault, right? You were put in a position, and on a battlefield to did things that were extremely difficult. And so I hear you talk, and I feel angry on behalf of you when I see the U.S. government ignore a lot of veterans who come home with a lot of PTSD, a lot of mental health issues, and I don't see the state that is willing to put men and women, but let's be honest, it's a lot more men who end up going to war. They're fine with men putting their lives on the line, in that way. But then when they come back and they go, look at all my wounds, not just physical wounds, but those that are, not visible. I don't feel like there's that support. And I know you talk about this a little. I mean, you don't talk about this, but you reference in your book about, asking yourself at one point, am I just an instrument of the state? I'm curious if you can speak to, go deeper into mental health and the military and how veterans should be treated.
Certainly. I view it as my responsibility. I'm only upset with myself that I didn't take corrective action earlier. I think the resources are generally available. I think to the most part it has been destigmatized. I think some of the myths around the impacts to your job, certainly at a point, were probably very true. And I don't. I mean, I don't know. I've now wrote about going and seeking help for mental health. I've talked about it plenty, and I haven't found anybody, that treats me any differently. Alternatively, I've had a lot of people express thanks for me kind of talking about this openly. So I will have a hard time. I will always find a way to own and take responsibility for anything. So, but I think what we talked about these invisible wounds. And so what the military does is we do a really good job of identifying how to treat a physical wound. And so if you have a gunshot to the arm, like, we know how to assess, we know how to treat that. And so we spend a lot of time doing this life-saving training for these physical injuries. And that makes sense that we would, do that type of training. But we don't do any training to identify the invisible wounds, to do these self-assessments. And so if you had any type of injury, I can quickly identify the injury and look at, like, what would be the best way for me to treat this injury. I don't have any of the tools of how to do a self-assessment. And so, we categorize casualties in three ways: routine, priority, and urgent. And so a routine injury is like, I sprained my ankle, I can kind of just walk it off, it'll be better. Priority means I need a buddy to help me. Like, I'm wounded or injured enough that I need somebody to, what we call, like, firemen carrying me out or something like that. And then an urgent casualty means that I need to get to a higher echelon of care, that I cannot treat this injury. My buddy is not qualified I need to get to a doctor. And so I think you can apply a similar model to these invisible wounds where it's like, maybe I'm just having a funky day, and, like, let's just know that funky days are just part of life. And so there is no that's part of one of the issues that I found, like, surrounding the military, is that as soon as somebody in the military is having a bad day, experiencing a normal human emotion, sadness, jealousy, anger, these are all normal emotions to life. We would say, like, oh, you must have some type of combat-related disorder. And it's like, that's not helpful either. I'm just having a normal human emotion, and we don't need to immediately elevate it to, like, that it's a disorder, right? And so, like, I think we're quick to kind of, as veterans were kind of mediating their experiences, anytime they had any emotion other than happiness, we said, oh, like, you're having an emotion other than happiness, there must be something. And I think that's
really fair. I hear that point. I think that's really fair. It's kind of like, oftentimes you're human. Everyone's human, and you're not allowed to have a human moment without it being attached to something else.
Yeah.
And I hear that. And also, I'm curious, because I know, as a boy myself, as friends, having two sons, I know all of my friends who played football carried certain attributes, and it contributed to a form of aggression that was not that of people who played another sport.
Sure.
Or were doing music, right?
Sure.
Because the culture allowed for that. And it was not their fault. I'm not blaming anyone, but it required that, right? We know from data, we see people that are boxers, if they're fighting a lot, we know that that breeds a certain way of thinking.
Sure.
Not blaming it, not critiquing it, other than because I know it, that means I have to be prepared for the boys that are doing this. How are they going to end up in 10 years, 20 years? Because it's perpetuating a certain way of thinking.
Sure.
Right? So similarly, we know that the police force, there's a certain thing. You're always on guard. You have to do certain things. Not blaming any of them, but that's going to perpetuate a certain way of thinking. So if we're men, we have to be mindful of these things so that we're unpacking them. And then also, I would imagine in the military, it's constantly doing what you said. You're going out in a place where you're fighting for your life, fighting for your country, fighting all these things. Of course, you have to come with something. But like football, like boxing, like all these other sports, is it not breeding something that then men can do a disservice if we're not unpacking it?
Sure.
Because we then, I don't know, form aggressions, or we form a way to like camouflage our feelings, or, you know, I don't know. That's where I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because in our show, and what we really want to undefine is what masculinity means, how it affects men, and how we can be better.
Yeah. And so, you know, certainly you are indoctrinated or inculcated into these cultures, whether it's the football team or the military, where, you know, it is violent, it is aggressive. You aren't reintegrated into normal society. There's no boot camp back into that transition, you know. And so,
do you think that's healthy?
I think certainly many warrior cultures throughout history had really good rituals of reintegration. You know, Native Americans had where the entire tribe would circle around the warriors when they came back. They would give them the appropriate space and honor, and then and so it was like the whole community kind of rallied around them. And so there are certainly, you know, the Spartans had their own kind of reintegration where they would do like fear shedding, and it was normal for them to weep on the battlefield after, and so you can look to past examples of warrior cultures who had, I think, much healthier reintegration transition periods between the battle, the combat, and then the home front. And I don't think that I think we lack that currently. And to your point is this idea of what this guy Colonel Cooper came up with the color code. And so essentially when you are in combat, you need to be what's in the yellow, which means alert but relaxed. So I'm alert that I'm constantly checking kind of scanning my baseline, looking for anomalies, and then something arises, and I can fluidly have the cognitive dexterity to attack that problem without it overwhelming me. Well, being alert all the time certainly comes at a cost. It comes at a cost and a benefit. It comes at the benefit being nothing like overwhelms me. Like I don't become overwhelmed by the environment or circumstance because I was expecting. You know, as the Stoics had this idea of premeditation malorum or premeditation of evil. Like I was expecting something, it happened, and so now I'm not knocked flat by it. What I have had a hard time to this day is that by staying in the yellow, by keeping things compartmentalized, I deal very well with stress or certain challenges, but life becomes a little bit more stale. You become emotionally detached. You might be called cold or distant. And so to get those rich, so you maintain a very steady baseline when you're kind of always alert and always vigilant because nothing can kind of throw you off your center.
But Tom, let me ask you. Sorry, Liz. Those things you're saying.
Yes.
Let's just take it out of the military. Let's not even talk about that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that if we were to design a man that we would think would be the best representation of what a man could be in humanity, wouldn't they include those very things that you just said have to be omitted?
I would say that yes. And so what I'm getting at is like you need to be situationally alert. Like there's a time and place, but that a lot of these professions put you on alert for that it becomes a lifestyle. And when that becomes the way that you live, you've really missed out on the fullness and richness of life. And so if you want a full life, you have to be vulnerable. And the whole idea of being constantly vigilant and on alert is to reduce your vulnerability, but to get the highs and lows. And so I'm always like this, but then my happy moments are just a little blip. But my sad moments are just a little blip. But that's not a full or rich or complete life. And so it's a safe way to live, but it's not a good way to live. And so I'm not advocating. So if I were to advocate a good masculine lifestyle, it's someone who in the correct situation or moment can present themselves to be vigilant and alert so that they can respond adeptly to whatever situation arises, but then can transition back to having the vulnerability required to, like, I don't get excited for things, like that's not, so I don't get let down, but then I'm not. And so this is not healthy. So I'm saying this is
that's
not
what I'm
healthy.
interested in hearing. It's not healthy.
It's
not to critique your profession at all.
And I don't know if everybody within my profession maintains these same exact values or ideals. But for me, 15 years, approaching 15 years in this profession, it's how I have found to be effective in this profession. And as a father, for the first time, I've had to force myself into being vulnerable, to being present. Because when you're fully present in a moment,
You're a father to a boy.
I have 2 boys and a girl, and when you're fully present, you can only see the thing in the moment. And so when my daughter's 4, and so she's my oldest. And so when I had her and she was an infant, for those moments when I would rock her to bed and sing her, I had to be I knew that I was robbing myself of a fleeting opportunity. That if I stayed like I normally am, I said, you won't get the richness of this. And so I had to be vulnerable. And so it's still something I'm working through for sure, knowing that this is not a rich or complete way to live, and something and that there is strength in being vulnerable, and that's something I struggle with.
I love that you can say that. Liz, you have some. I have so many follow-up things.
Go.
And no, please.
But I mean, we go in a million different directions. I think compartmentalization. Is that a
Works for me.
word we're making up?
Sure, let's say
it exists.
Mr. English major, you know that?
Right.
He says so.
No, because I have in my romantic, but even I think not just romantic relationships with men, even with my friendships with men and my dad to a certain extent, there is that ability to compartmentalize that is both super annoying but also jealousy inducing. Because I can't compartmentalize. I wish I could. I feel like my life would be a lot better if I were able to do it better. But at the same time, when I've been with a partner, for example, who does it, it comes off as deceiving, because it's like are you feeling the thing or are you not, right? Or it almost, again, deceiving may not make sense
but it's hard
to people,
to trust.
but yes, and again, unempathetic or again cold. But at the same time, we all become a version of our professions, especially in a culture like the one we live in right now, where work is so tied to your identity. And so I think about actors and famous people, right? Like it's so hard, I think, for, many famous people who are so kind-hearted, so amazing, but end up bringing in their sort of regular lives what they have to bring in their professional lives, which is to be the center and to enjoy being the center and to make things about you. It works and it makes them successful, in their work, but then a lot of them struggle in their, regular lives.
You're listening to the Man Enough podcast. We'll be right back.
Man Enough is brought to you by Mint Mobile. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2023, why are you still paying insane amounts of money every month for your phone bill? Switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save this year. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. Okay, I remember when phone plans were $15 a month. A long time ago. And you would get like only a certain amount of minutes, or remember like free unlimited minutes on nights and weekends. And so you could you'd wait until it was 7 and then you'd call your friend because you didn't have any more minutes left. Yeah, with Mint Mobile, you can get that same price. But with every plan, you'll get unlimited talk and text. You'll get high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You'll get the old price, but with all the new technology. And by going online only, Mint Mobile eliminates all these different prices that you end up getting charged with other phone companies. They're passing all of that time and all that money and all those savings on to you. So to get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the phone shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/manenough. That's mintmobile.com/manenough. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/manenough.
All right. Welcome back to the Man Enough podcast. I think society is really screwed up right now. There's some amazing things about it. One of the things is the inequality of men and women, the inequality of people of different walks of life. One of the things is men have held the keys to the world for so long and not always done it great. We've done it great in a lot of ways, but certainly not. My ancestors were slaves. Everyone would admit that wasn't the best thing. That was generally not controlled by women. Generally, it was men. So that's something that
Women did it too.
Women did it too, but the leaders of it and the ones that were in charge and the top of the food chain were men. This is not a knock on men in general as our species. It's a great species. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. But we can be better. So in order to be better, we have to have, that's why I want to take the military or music, my career, the film industry, or boxing or sports. Let's take all that out of it. Just men.
Yeah.
We have to be better. We have to be better about caring for other people, having empathy.
Sure.
We have to be better about listening to other people, especially our wives or women in general, because there's so much to offer that oftentimes have been dismissed. So I look at what is some of the things that have contributed to us not being our best self. And some of those things has to do with these false understandings of what masculinity is, right? Having power over another. And the list goes on and on. I'm not going to sit there and list them all, but there are things. So we then have to reflect and examine, how do we get better? So when I hear a man tell me, I cut off my emotions to survive, got it. Want you to survive 100% in your field, whatever that is, you need to do that. But do we recognize that is not how I want my son to be raised? Because I want him to experience all the joy, and my daughters to be raised to be married to a man that doesn't hear and listen and, all these things. We have to be better. So I am curious because you deal with so many men. And if you're really honest, forgetting the work itself, just I deal with so much men and I see masculinity up close. How do we get better? How do we really tangibly, actual things, right? Not just big grand theories.
Sure. And I mean, what you're pointing out there is all that comes at a cost. So it's congratulations, you're good at compartmentalizing. You're paying for that in other ways. And so everything comes at a price. And so, again, I would not advocate that is the best way to go through life. And when I think of how a roadmap forward for men in our culture, I think of two things. I think of one. I think to Reverend King gave a sermon in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1957 to a Baptist church, and he titled it "Conquering Self-Centeredness." And so, first and foremost, he talks about that as a man matures, that he must strive towards higher loyalties. He must strive towards a cause that is something greater than himself. And then he talks about this idea of the eternal I, or arrested development. And so what so many men really are just children, are boys who never grow up. It's a Peter Pan syndrome that I think is infected so much of our culture. And so you talk about masculinity as like power over, and how that's like that's a wrong way to view it. I agree. To me, what he's talking about is it's through service to others. Servant leadership is really this idea of service and sacrifice for something greater than yourselves. And it doesn't have to be through military service, right? It could be to your family, it could be to your community, it can be to any, there are many, many good and righteous causes that are greater than the individual. And so for you to end the eternal I, or just focusing on your individualistic concerns, he talks about like this, that children are necessarily egocentric. This is all from this sermon. That you're a bundle of your own emotions as a child, that everything has to be about you. But if you were to mature into a man at some point, you ascribe to these higher loyalties, and you say, I'm willing to serve this thing, this person, this cause, and make sacrifices. And so I think that is where you can escape the eternal I. That's where you can break the arrested development. That is where you can end this Peter Pan syndrome, is when you find something to serve, and I would just service comes at a cost, but I think the ultimate reward for having a higher loyalty to something outside yourself is so fulfilling and so rewarding and so necessary in any individual's kind of growth process. And then the other way that I think tangibly to get after it is Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey. And in the hero's journey, there's a calling, and then you respond to that call. And it usually means you leave your home, you slay a dragon, whatever this proverbial dragon is, you learn a lesson, and then there's some kind of where you come back and you bring those lessons forward to your community, to your neighbors. And so you have to find like what is that calling? And part of the issue is like that we in today's day and age where there's so much information, we're waiting for that perfect, what is that? Like we're waiting for like God to write it in the clouds for us. Like it's like you just got to start to pursue something, not recklessly with some planning, but at some point, if you're waiting for everything to be perfect, to align, to step outside that comfort zone and to go find and slay that dragon, if you're waiting for the perfect conditions, they're not coming. And so like at some point, you just need to go out and get after something, and you will struggle, and there will be adversity, and you will grow in that adversity and that struggle, and you will have an opportunity to really refine your character. It's cyclical. So veterans will transition. They'll go back to their home. They'll have gone and slayed, even if they don't go to combat, right? They've gone out, they've done something, they've discovered some things. But then they end up back in their mother's home, and they kind of they start to infantilize themselves. They start to kind of revert back to the boy that they were when they last. And so like what men need to do is they need to go, what is my call? I need to go out and do that thing, accomplish whatever that thing is. What growth did I experience from that adversity that I can bring back? But then find the next call. Like life is not about just reaching the summit. Because once you're done climbing, you're done. You've got to find the next calling, the next hill to because otherwise you will start to get complacent. You'll start to revert back. And so I think you've got to continue on a cyclical hero's journey where you go out, you learn some things, and then you bring those back. You add value. You contribute. And so, and that's part of it as well, is like there's too much what's in it for me, or consumerism for men, where they're waiting that rather than being contributors, they're consumers. And rather than trying to find ways to be useful, they're trying to take, right? And so to me, as a servant leader, as someone who's committed to higher loyalties, I don't want to take, I want to contribute. And I want to find where can I be most useful within my community, within my friendships. And so we get this idea or these depictions of, Homer Simpson or Al Bundy or Family Guy, where like the man's work is he does something for 8 hours in the office and then comes back and now, all right, everybody served me. I did. It's like, no, now you're at work again. and so like these models of dads or men that we've seen through popular culture, I think are very like they pollute kind of the way that it's like I work long hours. I come home and I get right back to work and I continue. I don't get
Liz likes hearing that.
And so like
right?
It's you got to keep being useful,
working.
keep contributing, and it's not like, hey, I put money in the bank, so now my work here is done. It's like, okay, and you have responsibility as a dad, a father, a partner, a friend, and so like and I think we see too often these representations of like. My daughter watches Peppa the Pig all the time, right? The dad in Peppa the Pig is a hazard and liability to his family. It's like always the mom kind of figuring things out because the dad has just punted and screwed everything up. And like, or Phil Dunphy, like he's charming, like we like Phil Dunphy, but he's quite often a hazard to like. And so when can we have like a positive masculinity where it's that the man isn't the screw up, the man isn't the guy that sits with his hand in his pants. Watching football like that, that's crap, and that's maybe a couple ideas.
No, thank you.
That's I mean, there's a trope, right, of the bumbling idiot dad, right, in every. I mean, just so many movies, so much. I mean, even ads. I think it's starting to sort of shift because brands can now make money off of positive masculinity. But I think that it was exactly that, and so. And, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was, that most people who end up in the military are peacemakers. How do you think men can contribute to peace and be peacemakers, both in, I think, the wider world collectively, but also in their individual relationships, perhaps with women?
Sure. Like, first and foremost, you have to have peace internally. And so, to me, you got to quell the anger. And so whatever that anger is inside of you has to be quelled. And I grew up in an environment where men and women were screaming and throwing. And I always viewed men who would physically intimidate or need to raise their voice. I always viewed that as such cowardice and such weakness. I think before you can begin to evangelize peace, you've got to get some peace internally. And I bet you would find some of that peace through service to others. And because there's so much purpose and reward when you lose yourself in a cause of something greater than oneself. And then I think you have to resist the temptation to sow discord. It's intoxicating to sit on the sidelines and throw stuff at the people in the arena. It's so intoxicating to be angry. It's you feel this righteous indignation and it kind of feels good, but it's fleeting. Where can you add harmony? Balance, I think, is often a bridge too far. I think very rarely will you find perfect balance. I don't know where that exists, but I think you can certainly find opportunities for increased harmony.
I'm gonna ask you 5 or 6 questions. Give me like 2 or 3 word answers.
Okay.
Tell me something that you hope that your boy becomes. Just quick answer. Or your boys.
Loyal.
Tell me something that your daughter becomes.
Strong.
Something that makes you cry.
Thinking of my dog.
When was the last time you cried?
I cried when I gave the eulogy for my aunt. I often get moved to tears, but don't cry, just through general observations of my kids. I'm just so humbled and grateful and moved at these little humans.
2 things you love about your wife.
There's many. her courage, and her strength. Like I said, that's what I'd want for my daughter. My wife is very strong.
Beautiful. Well, let us, as we come to like some of our final questions, I would love to tell you, this is so interesting in my brain because I have a weird relationship with, I see the world as one country. I know we're not, but I see it that way. I know that we have to have protections, and yet it breaks my heart because I see the world as one country. I have family all throughout the world. I've been everywhere. I see the world as one country. So I hate that we have to have division and protection against each other when I see the whole world as one family. And yet I get it. And since we are here in this time of humanity where we need those protections, I say this sincerely. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. And mostly, you shared some stuff, vulnerable stuff, like you have a friend, Zach, who saved your life. I don't want that to fall on deaf ears. That is a huge thing. Most people do not experience their life being taken from them, or at least the glimpse of that. So for you to have experienced that in the name of protecting something that you feel loyal to and greater than yourself, and for all of us and for the world being one family, is really, really spectacular and deserves all the love and acknowledgement. I know that you deflect it because I see that you're very humble. But I admire your courage. And also, I'm thankful to Zach that you had a friend that you could release in a way that you couldn't in other ways, so that you didn't have that mental breakdown, so that you could come home and have a family and help other young men and women and train them and hopefully give them a glimpse of this is what you're going to experience, and we want you to be wonderful beings afterwards or through it. So here's some key things I've learned. And maybe that's how to undefine what it means to be masculine and to embrace feminine stuff. And yes, you got to put your emotions aside to get through it, but make sure you get back in touch with it because that's how we advance, so much. So I just wanted to just say some words to you that were in my heart, and we appreciate you.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing, the things that you're working on and like what you're trying to move through. And, there's this saying like, thank you for your service is like the end of a conversation and it should be the beginning of a conversation. And I am glad that we were able to start that and hopefully encourage more people to, ask questions and be curious.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. We have a final question we ask everyone. And we're really curious to know what you think, what yours is.
What does it mean to be man enough to you?
To be a servant leader committed to something greater than yourself.
I love that one. I don't know who. That's amazing. That was a little weak. I didn't give you a good one, man. I mean, there it is. We're grateful that you were here, allowing us to go have this conversation. I don't know how often you have conversations like this. This is what we do all the time, is have conversations with different people of different walks of life, and what they've learned so that we can learn from it.
Yeah, it's a really important one. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank
you for that. You want to take us out, Liz? Take us out.
Yeah. So if you like what you heard, you can follow us everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter? ? No, Twitter.
Sure.
Yeah, lots of tweets.
You can go to manenough.com/podcast.
Yes.
Go to YouTube.
You go to YouTube, you go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere. It's free. And we would love for you to join our community.
We would love it. Tell your friends if you feel like this is something, and maybe tell like your brothers or your kids or something like that. Because I do think conversations like this, whether or not you agree with everything we say, is part of the solution. Just having conversations, starting about it.
Yes, send the podcast to someone.
Send it over.
Just like someone you haven't talked to in a long time.
That's right.
It's again, some way to start a combo.
That's right. And you get to hear more of Liz. Until next time, you'll see Justin with us, hopefully real soon. I'm Jamey Heath.
I'm Liz Plank.
And this is
Men Enough.